Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Harkey. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. This is technology planning for the universal traveler who is already traveling. And now, on to our main event. I'd like to introduce you to our speaker, the awareness guru of Indiana, the thriller of manila envelopes, the man with the plan, Dan Hadaway. Dan?
Thank you very much, Michael. I appreciate that introduction and welcome everybody to our first webinar since, I don't know, it's like September or July is the last time we did one. I have to say it's all kind of foggy to me because we just got back from our, the cybersecurity conference that I get to moderate every year for the IBA. And that's actually my shout out for today. I'd like to do it to the Indiana Bankers Association. If you don't attend the cybersecurity conference every year, you should. It was 2 weeks ago, actually. I'm still kind of coming down from it a little bit. We got to see Jim Reckel again. If you haven't seen him talk, boy, you're missing something good. Michael Podshabaugh was able to scare us all about, what social engineers can do and get away with in many financial institutions. And I mean, there was just a whole host of amazing speakers there. But what I wanted to say is the thing is, at the end of every conference for about the last 5-6 years, Liz Kilty, who works with Lori Reese, the training director there, she gets up at the end and she thanks me for all my hard work. And I just feel everybody needs to know that Liz and Lori are the ones that do all the hard work, and they just make it look so easy. So everybody thinks, oh, poor Dan's doing all the hard work, but I get to design the agenda, or help design the agenda, I should say, with the help of a really amazing committee. And so anyway, just long story short, I'm just really kind of flabbergasted about the fact that I get to be a moderator of the conference, and Liz and Lori deserve everybody's gratitude and praise. And then also, by the way, there's a person there at the IBA. Her name is Marcy Borden. She's a real behind the scenes type person. She does a lot of work for the workshops I do at the IBA and for the conference, and she definitely deserves accolades and praise. This year, the topics at that conference range from, of course, cybersecurity to things like what the FBI is seeing in cybercrime, to incident response testing, incident response planning, incident response testing again. Incident response was a big part of the agenda. But we also had everything from vendor management to network segmentation to
Dan. Hey,
what?
Dan. Hey, I don't think people came here to listen to you go on and on about the IBA. Can we
Really?
please get on with the webinar on the technology planning?
All right, but I mean, where I was heading next was that, I was going to give $1 million away to the person at the webinar here who can name my
Oh, go
favorite
ahead.
car.
Oh, go ahead then.
No, 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 that's all right. I'll just move on. I mean, it was a really good talk. He gave everybody $1 million of Zimbabwe money, but I'll move on. So I will have to say though, before I move on too far, that a couple of my very loyal clients, and I mean, they're great clients, and they approached me really just kind of saying, hey, we love your webinars. And I always think it's kind of cute when they say stuff like, and by the way, you should keep doing it free for clients. But they felt, and they kind of brought up that maybe we're giving away too much with these webinars and really with the movies. And they had suggested that we could probably charge, for the movies that, we produce of these webinars and for this webinar. And I just feel like I want to kind of address that now, because I've had a chance to think about it a little bit, and I definitely appreciate, they're probably in the audience now because they're such loyal clients, and I definitely appreciate the sentiment. They had even mentioned, by the way, that we also think that your competitors are watching your movies, and so you're really kind of helping them stay up to speed with you and that sort of thing. And I kind of realized that quite a few years back when I was sitting at a conference and somebody elbowed me. I was taking notes, not really paying attention. Somebody elbowed me and pointed at the screen and said, "You recognize that?" And I look up, and there the speaker has one of the Infotex boilerplates, and she's just walking through the boilerplate. Took the Infotex branding was no longer in it, but and I won't mention the big accounting firm that she was from, but I'll have to be honest with you, I was more flattered about that than anything. And I guess the way I see it is that, and this is kind of the way we looked at it way back when I was in the video business too, is that, if they've got to borrow your ideas, because there is no copyright of an idea anyway, but by the time they're making it work, we're on to the next big idea. But more importantly, these webinars, we get a lot of value from them. They're actually what helps us stay at the forefront, because in order to teach something, you have to learn it. And it's not like, we know all this stuff intuitively or anything. We do research to get ready for these webinars. We pull together, inputs from everybody in the company, a lot of times from our clients. And then we share. We're more of idea reporters. We share what we hear everywhere. And a lot of the ideas you might hear at these webinars are not originated with Infotext. Most of them, by the way, are founded at least in guidance of some sort. But by getting ready for these webinars, we are pulling our own self together and educating ourselves as to what our clients want us to know, because the webinars are usually driven from the questions and the problems and the struggles that our clients are having. And one last thing on that also I'd like to say is that I also on a regular basis hear from new clients that they found us in these webinars or on the movies that are at tour.infotext.com. And so enough said, I'll get on with the agenda, but I just want everybody to know that I really appreciate you coming to these webinars, whether you're a client or not. We love helping people manage technology risk, and the webinars are all part of it. I feel like it's a win-win for everybody. Today's agenda is really an annual talk based on technology planning. And so if you've been to this webinar before, you probably recognize this agenda, because it's the same exact agenda that I had last year. The difference is what we're planning about, right? So at least since 2016, when we did our first, good webinar, I think we did a webinar on technology planning a couple times before that, but the 2016 webinar was really the one based in guidance, and it was really based on, the Universal Traveler, which is a book that was written by a couple people. I can't remember the other guy, but Jim Bagnell was one of my favorite professors when I was in college. And he wrote a book called The Universal Traveler, which talked about creative problem solving as a journey. And so what I want you to know is that if you want to get back to the basics of what is technology planning, what does a technology planning process look like, et cetera, there is a movie out there already. Mike, if you haven't already, this would be one of the links that I would want you to chat to everybody, because I feel like if you're here to watch this webinar, I'm hoping it's more review, and then we'll get to the what should we be planning for in 2019 information that I usually pull together from being at the cybersecurity conference, quite frankly, and I'll that's really what I'm hoping to spend the majority of the time on today. But what I think I'm going to go ahead and do, though, is go into that 2016 PowerPoint just real quickly here, and I'm still learning how to use my Macintosh here, so forgive me if this takes a little bit longer than it should. But what I'm wanting to do is, come on, help me find it here. Is find that, and so there we go. I found it. The one thing I noticed about the Macintosh is different than the Microsoft devices I've used is finding stuff is a lot harder. But this is the overall PowerPoint. If you dial into that movie, we'll start with, hey, this is just what an IT auditor thinks. There's people in the planning business, planning certifications. PMI was the cert that I was trying to get before I decided I wanted to go into information security. And PMI is the Project Management Institute. They do a lot on planning. But suffice it to say, I'm just going to pull this slide up, hopefully, real quick here. That my professor taught, problem solving as being on a journey that has the same processes that we really need to go through if we're doing a technology plan for a bank, a credit union, or I noticed there might be some schools here today as well. And so, fortunately in the banking industry, by the way, we don't really have to worry too much about accepting the situation. It's our examiners and our auditors to help us accept the situation. But what we're going to be spending a good portion of the talk today, the webinar today, will be on the analysis phase. In other words, how do we analyze the ideation, the ideas that we've brought to the table from various different places. Top down and bottom up is what this webinar actually talks about. But trying to make it real quick just by way of review. We talk a little bit about various processes, and then we really kind of drill down into what guidance has to say about the webinars and that sort of thing. Really ending with the creation of 3 lists that I'm going to be talking about a little bit here in my second part of our agenda today. And then we delivered, of course, some boilerplates. You can't go to an Infotech webinar without getting a boilerplate of some kind, right? So I'm going to go ahead and close out of this PowerPoint now and just try to please let me close out of you without a lot of problems. Thank you very much. Good. So these are the boilerplates that we actually pulled together, and they're actually numbered in order. I believe that Sophia and Michael will be delivering the ones that are numbered here to you at least, starting with the FFIEC requirements. Now, we haven't updated this since 2015. So that tells me we did do a webinar in 2015 on the technology planning, but there hasn't been a lot released or published by FFIEC related to technology planning since the management booklet was published in 2015. So these are just excerpts of all the different places that FFIEC.gov mentions technology planning. I always like to start there because I want our recommendations. I want what you learn in these webinars to be based in guidance, right? But from there, then there's a policy document for those of you who maybe are just getting started on the whole notion of technology planning. We say that if you're doing something that takes a lot of time, it should be born in a technology, in a policy, I should say. Anything that takes a lot of time, unfortunately, is born in technology. But this isn't really meant to be a standalone policy. Most people will pull excerpts out of here and place them into an already existing high-level policy. What I like to make sure we address in a technology planning policy, if we're going to have a policy requiring it, is that it should be multidisciplinary, which is our fancy way of saying executive management should participate in it. There should be an adoption policy as a part of it, and then it should at least refer to your risk appetite statement. And the movie, from 2016 goes into a lot of details as to why we think that should be. But suffice it to say that I see and audit a lot of banks and credit unions who don't really have a policy requiring them to do anything in their technology plan. And I'm okay with that for smaller banks, because as long as they have a plot process in place, I'm not exactly that concerned about whether there's a policy requiring or not. The process itself, though, should really be high level to the weeds. And so what I mean by that is it should start off with a vision statement that basically establishes what we want our vision for technology to be in it. It really should be addressed at, and established at the C-suite level. It should be, that really the owners of the organization that are saying this is our vision for technology, which is why we need a risk appetite statement and an adoption philosophy to be part of it. And then from there, of course, we need a strategy. We need to establish, here's how we're going to align our technology strategy with the business strategy of our organization. If you're a bank and you're not updating your business plan annually, well, then maybe your technology plan is pointing to the last time you did update your business plan. But if we're not aligning technology to the business strategy, we're missing one of the primary goals of IT governance. And then finally, the strategy itself then would be shored up or addressed or articulated by a technology plan that really is a tactical plan. So in other words, if the vision is we want to have a safe use of technology, or if one of the vision statements is that we want our technology use to be safe, the strategy might be to develop an IT governance program, and the tactic might be to develop an awareness program, an incident response program, a vendor management program, the technical security standards, and I'm being very, very simplistic about that, of course, nowadays for at least banks and credit unions. And so, one of the things I forgot to do here, what I do like about, the Macintosh is that you can kind of pull up and look at all the documents pretty easily here. And so if you look here, then the number 4 document here, that's what I'm wanting to spend some good time on, which is the tactical plan, the analysis that we should do to make sure that our tactics are aligned with our strategy, which is aligned with our vision, which is aligned with the business plan. And so we'll be talking about the nuts and bolts of what the tactical plan could include this year. And so this is just a spreadsheet, another one of Dan's spreadsheets that has a lot of ideas, many of which I picked up at that cybersecurity conference I talked about. And then this last document, we're not giving this to you, but this is from last year, and I've got it here so I can bring up and help you understand why we decided to simplify it this year. If you need this to help understand how everything fits together, let us know, but we believe that you'll be able to get everything you need from this spreadsheet here. And so I think I'm kind of ready to go back to the the actual the webinar itself. I guess I was going to make a joke about how, if everything you needed to know is in that that movie, then why are you here for this webinar? Well, we're getting to that. And by way of review, one of the things I wanted to make sure I remembered to say about the 2016 movie was that, first of all, technology planning is a management awareness process, in my opinion, and really a technical team awareness process. It helps the technical team understand why we're not doing some of the things we're not doing and why we are doing some of the things we are doing, if they can kind of draw a line from the tactics that the technical team is knee deep in up to the actual strategy statement that the management team established. The word why really greases the machinery. And so we should see technology planning as an awareness process. And then meanwhile, there's 2 different types of analysis, so to speak, going on. The top down is where really we have at a top level what the owners of the company have decided to do. In banks, that's the board of directors, and they've decided at the top level based on management recommendations. And I've been in banks where management pretty much controls the board. I've been in banks where the board is actually very active and driving the technology growth or technology change process. But that's all top down. We also need to poll our users, survey our users, especially those that are going to various conferences about banking or about schools. For those of you who are from schools that are at our webinar here, and really have a bottom-up prioritization based on what our users need. If management says we want not only a safe use of technology, but we also want our technology to be as good as the guy down the streets, and that's pretty vernacular, right? But the users, the people that are actually out there competing with the guy down the street, they're going to have a lot to say about what we need to do if we're going to be as good as the guy down the street. And by the way, I'm pretty sure most bank managers would say better than the guy down the street, and I'm there with that too. So that's the second main takeaway from that movie. The third main takeaway is that if we want to simplify technology planning, what we're really doing is establishing 3 lists. We're actually tweaking 2 of those lists, because they don't change a lot from year to year, especially if your bank is only doing updating their business plan once every 3 years or whatever. And then the third list, that's where all the work takes place. That's where I'm going to spend a lot of time today, and that's the tactical plan that we need to analyze and make sure that our tactics are prioritized, so that if we don't get to something, it's because it wasn't that important, or because it didn't really have a lot to do with the second list, the list of strategy statements, or it didn't have a lot to do with that first list, the list of vision statements. And so the 3 lists I just articulated there was the vision, the strategy, and the tactical plan. And this is, people laughed. I got some feedback from our webinar last year, And I really appreciate the people that talk to me about that. I felt like since it was an annual webinar, maybe I should get feedback. And by the way, we do have an evaluation that goes out to you at the end of all these webinars. But if you want to talk to me about what you think should improve about our webinars, I'm more than happy to listen. That's actually one of our tactics, is to listen to our customers. And it's actually a strategy and a vision. We exceed our customers' expectations is what our vision is. And one of the strategies there is to listen. And so a tactic would be to have our evaluation forms go out at the end of these webinars. And so by way of, volume, then, if the vision is getting up to be, 3-4 pages, then it's not really a vision. It's probably a group of strategy statements that need to be prioritized. In other words, they need to be whittled down. If we have to have more than 4 vision statements, then maybe our vision is too scattered. And the vision, by the way, shouldn't change a lot from one year to the next. I'll bring up an example for you right now. Here's once I make sure I know which document I'm looking for. I guess I'm going to have to expand this to, yeah, this is the document I'm looking for. And so this is these boilerplates that Mike has made available to you. Everything, by the way, in a boilerplate is an example. You have to make this your own, right? And so all of our boilerplates, by the way, start off with a copyright of, it's called a transfer of copyright agreement. What we're basically saying here is that you're welcome to customize these boilerplates to your own institution. And when you do so, we let you have the copyright to that document. But we retain the copyright to the boilerplate. Obviously, we need that copyright in order to offer it to other organizations. And then also another important part of the transfer copyright agreement is that, you can share this with your auditors and your examiners, of course, but we wouldn't want the new school corporation that's here at the webinar to fire this off to everybody that they meet at the HEC conference next month for schools, because, we want to be the ones that decide who does and doesn't get these free boilerplates. Everybody pretty much honors that from a general person's agreement perspective anyway. But if you look here, we have sample vision statements that could be used in your technology plan. We have sample strategy statements that could be used in your technology plan. And then based on everything that could be done, we're suggesting that you then choose out of the 100 million things we could do next year in order to make sure we're, living our vision through our strategy. Let's try to boil them down to a manageable list. I know it's a lot harder, than it is to say it, or it's easier said than done. But really what we want to make sure we do is we want to give our technical staff or even the middle management staff in large firms that have large, millions of employees working on the technology processes, even in the biggest of banks, even in Chase, the technical people have to have the ability to say, yeah, sure, we can do that, but it's not in the plan. Okay, and that's one of the big deliverables that come out of awareness process called technology planning, is we ought to be aware of when we're straying from what we've wanted to do, because that's okay. It makes us, flexible. It makes us zig where our customers zag, is what we say at Infotex, right? But when we stray from the plan, we ought to at least know what we're doing, and that's one of the main deliverables of the technology planning process. So that's pretty much in a nutshell what I wanted to say about the 2016 movie. I also feel like we need to find and deliver to you I just want to kind of talk a little bit about the document that we made available last year. Mike, I don't know if I'm screwing stuff up by showing all that on the bottom. But so what we're not delivering this, we delivered it last year. I just want to launch this and bring this up for you. And where is it? There is, well, it's not going to let me put it on the front. I thought to myself, maybe you ought to practice up a little bit navigating around a Macintosh so you don't look so amateurish at it, but I just didn't have the time. So this is what we delivered last year. And if you notice, there's a lot of green, there's some red in there. Blue are instructions. Red's what you definitely want to make sure you customize to yourself. And I'm going to walk through this in a lot of detail. But the main thing I wanted to let you know is that last year there was a lot of confusion people got with me because they're like, you know, it looks to me like you might have accidentally included some audit findings in there and some exam findings. And no, that's not what we did. We have a sanitized audit document that we use when, you know, prospective audit clients of ours want to see what our audits look like. We call it the Acme audit. No, we did not audit Acme Corporation. Even though Kurt Vonnegut has been calling for the audit of Acme for years and years, since before he died. You know, just that was kind of a joke. But my point being is that this document ended up being way too confusing for what we were trying to do with it. So what we did this year is we simplified and really tried to produce a document that is more usable by people that are just wanting to copy and paste into what you're already using. And so once I make sure I've addressed all the points that are in my PowerPoint, we're going to dive into this tactical plan document. This is a boilerplate that Mike's given you. It's the spreadsheet. Yes, it is another Dan spreadsheet. You know, it's got the boilerplate on it there. And then we have some example vision statements, example strategy statements. We feel like you might want to keep that right in your spreadsheet that you're using to analyze all of the potential tactics you could consider. Because if you can't tie it back to this, maybe we should nuke that from the tactical plan, or maybe we really don't know what our strategy is yet. And so the process of getting to these two statements, I'm really simplifying today. You need to watch that 2016 movie to get to these two statements, because what I want to do today is spend a lot of time on how do we analyze all the potential tactics that we have on our wish list. And we want to turn that wish list into a manageable, doable, yes, we can commit 100% to this tactical plan. So let us kind of go back to the webinar. And if you're getting dizzy, I apologize. And so one of the things I wanted to make sure I established then is that there's really three sources of information that we brought into this tactical plan analysis tool, which starts with the IBA cybersecurity conference that we attended last year, and as well as the one we attended this year. And then finally, we have some recommended basic controls that we kind of, it's a list we arrive on, you know, every year. We've kind of retooled and said, hey, let's arrive on it before the technology planning webinar. And so we're actually coming up with our basic controls list. They're due in October. And so that's what we'll be kind of looking at when we get into this spreadsheet. So I believe I'm now there. So let's find where that spreadsheet went. Sorry. You'll see me kind of removing a lot of stuff there. There was the music that you were listening to on the way in. There we go. There it is. So, so again, at a high level, you know, we're putting our, you know, we're kind of duplicating our strategy, our IT strategy in this first tab where we've got our vision statement. Should be, you know, 3 to 5 statements, and our strategy statements should be 5 to 8 statements. And now we've got, you know, gosh, you know, hundreds and hundreds of things we've been collecting as the years gone by of, you know, wow, we're not going to get that to this year. We're having a hard enough time getting to what we planned this year because of the things that ended up in here that we decided to go ahead and do this year. It's what I hear a lot of complaints about when we talk about technology planning is we never stick to the plan. Why should we do a plan anyway? Well, because we want to be aware of when we're not sticking to plan, and maybe after time we get some discipline. You know, right now I feel like we're finally conquering what I used to call rogue technology acquisitions, where management went out and brought in new technologies without even informing the technology team or the information security officer. I think we're getting beyond that, thankfully. So maybe we can now start looking forward. Hey, if you really want, you know, your ideas to be implemented, participate in our technology planning process. And so anyway, and by the way, I am going to zoom in on this if people are already chatting, Mike saying I can't read what Dan's got up there, because I wanted to just look at the spreadsheet at a high level to start. The cusp of what we changed this year are really these, you know, well, this column here, I'd say it's these columns right here. We never really worked on the tying them to a strategy statement. So if it doesn't have a strategy statement to it, it means it's new from this year. Because all these must be the Infotext basic controls, and now you get to here, you'll see that these are the statements that weren't in the spreadsheet last year, because I'm not going to tie them to a strategy statement for you. I'm hoping that you get that. But what we're really trying to do here is we're trying to say, hey, this particular idea, we're going to give it a name, because it's a lot easier for us to work with names than groups of paragraphs, of sentences, when we're talking about what we may or might do or what we decided we're going to do. And then we're going to assign it to somebody. That usually helps whittle it down. If you go to somebody saying, hey, we ought to do the XYZ project, everybody's all for that until we say, and we're going to assign it to you. Then it's like, well, let's take a closer look at this. Let's make sure this is worth doing. So even before we finalize who we're going to assign it to, we should queue up who we think it would be assigned to. Governance category is more of an Infotext thing. It helps us keep track of things. We've taken the FFIEC guidance and mapped it to 8 different programs, and a lot of our clients call it the asterisk. It's the subject of another webinar. But and the long and short of it is that every one of your tactics really could be assigned to either the access management program, the asset management program, the awareness training program, the incident response program, the risk management program, technical security standards, vendor management, and there's an 8th one in there that I forgot. So, business continuity. I always forget business continuity. But we want to try to decide, hey, which governance program is this impacting, at least at Infotext. It makes it easier for us to sort and that sort of thing. Where are we in the process? This is probably the column that everybody nukes out. But if you watch that 2016 movie, you might decide that, hey, we're going to leave that, in so we can know that, hey, we've already, implemented this. This is left over from last year. We're just still in the follow-up phases for this particular project. And we don't want to take it out of our tactical plan until we've dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's, because A, if we do, our auditors will wonder what's going on. But B, we also want to make sure we're making space in our schedule for the follow-up work from last year's tactical plan. And then, to give it a name column, where did the idea come from? I don't know if this is useful for you once you start using your own tactical plan. It might be, helpful for you to say, hey, this came from, George's group, that came from Marcia's group, and these ideas came from our group or something. I don't know. But then here's where we want to try to articulate what the tactic does. What is it? What are we talking about here? What's it supposed to achieve? The who, what, when, where, and why of technology tactics. What we've got to hear is a lot of times they're just questions. Should we consider doing this or that? It's notes Dan took at conferences as an example. There should be some work that needs to be done on these. We would have made these red or green or whatever, but also part of my simplification is that I thought I made everything black, but I see there's some red left over from last year's where it must have been, filtered out or something when we made everything black. And then this, I feel like, is one of the most important columns in the tactical plan. If you took it out last year, then it must have been, must mean that you didn't catch that part of my 2016 movie. Because if you can't draw this, if you can't draw your tactic to the strategy statement, what is the most relevant strategy objective? If your tactic doesn't answer one of these questions here, then I question whether it should be something we're working on. Or are we too, tunnel visioned in our strategy? Some people will say, well, that's governance, or that's risk management. That doesn't belong in a technology plan. And I can buy into that, but to me, you're missing out on the opportunity of knowing everything that's got to happen between now and the end of next year. And so to me, you might want to, revisit your strategy and put risk management objectives in your strategy, especially if your vision says we want technology to be safe, right? So, and then cost estimates, here's where we got to start documenting. And you'll notice most of these are time related. Some we might have put numbers in, but if we did put numbers, those are from probably 2016. Please don't go by the numbers that we have in here. And then we've given you some abilities to do some rankings. What's the potential worst case scenario cost estimate on a scale of 1 to 5, and that kind of gives us the ability to quickly determine full-blown total cost of ownership, not just the dollar amounts we might have in here, but also how much are we valuing the time. We could have a project that hardly takes any money at all, but it ends up being very expensive. And I would say rolling out our Facebook page is a good example of that, to where the cost in terms of total cost of information or of ownership might be a lot higher than just the dollar amounts we put over here. And then what's the benefits to our customer? This is one I feel like is going to make sure that we keep a priority focused on our customer. And then what kind of problems will this particular technology cause? If you can't see that, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a little bit further here, so it's a little bit easier for you to read what's at the top here. But if this is reducing risk, then hey, let's give it a 2. If it's neutral, we'll give it a 1. If it increases risk, we're not going to give it any points at all. And then finally, is there any kind of urgency to this? Is this something that the president's complained about because the guy down the street's already doing it or whatever? Maybe that becomes a high urgency versus a low urgency. And then we've just got status columns over here. You might end up during the course of the year hiding all these columns you used to plan, but still leaving the who's responsible and what did we originally say we were going to do? How does it tie to our strategy? And then you might have 2 columns here, status through June 30th, and then status after June 30th, because these, the information in the status cells here we're getting to big. And then finally over here, this is where we kind of have applied our metric. This is percent completion. You get to add these numbers in. If you use this plan as a project management tool throughout the year, then you want to keep track of, at a ballpark level, how far along are we on this project. But this is something that we kind of suggest you take a look at. Make sure you understand the math. Maybe make sure you agree with the math. I love it when customers come back and say, hey, and I did have somebody say, hey, we actually ended up giving risk management a scale of 1 to 5 instead of 1 to 2. We were surprised an auditor like you gave it such little weight. But once we started looking at everything, we felt like the reason why we weren't agreeing with these numbers here is because we actually give more weight to risk management. Well, my response was, do you have safety in your vision? And yes, they did. So this is just kind of a metric to try to help you sort by how relevant is this to our vision and our strategy. May or may not work for you. I would definitely make sure you understand the math. But now what I want to do is just kind of walk through each of these categories here in a little bit more detail. I'm going to zoom in a little bit further here. I think 200, let's go to 222%, just because I like numbers like that. And I feel like that's big enough now to where now you're looking at almost like a PowerPoint slide, right? And so, who should it be assigned to? Well, let's just kind of pull down to who hey, there's stuff in here we should assign to the board of directors, the chief financial officer. I'm sure that includes, among other things, maybe, but insurance. One of the basic controls we had from last year is that, hey, somebody should review your insurance posture so that you can have an appendix in your incident response plan. That way, the CFO doesn't have to leave the cruise he or she might be on because we happen to have an incident that requires us to interface with our insurance company. But that's just an example of who this could be assigned to. There's a lot coming out of the cybersecurity conference assigned to electronic banking. Shazam gave another really good talk where I was like, wow, this is what I look like when my eyes are glazing, because I don't know a lot about payment processing. And boy, there's a lot of good information that I didn't write down because I didn't know if it was relevant to banks. And that's one of the things I wanted to make sure I pointed out when we do get to the ideas that came from the cybersecurity conference. In a lot of cases, I wasn't paying attention to the talk because I was managing, what happens in, the back end on, making sure speakers show up on time and they know how long their talk's supposed to be, that sort of thing. But then B, in the case of the Shazam talk, some of that stuff I didn't understand payment processing enough to know whether it would be relevant to, smaller community-based banks nowadays or not. But going on and who this could be, delegated to. One of the things InfoText has been doing in our boilerplates now for both our business continuity planning and our incident response planning is we actually have a subcommittee of a committee. We have a sub-team or a subset of the incident response team called the technical recovery team. And this seems to work pretty good with those smaller banks that they're not so small that they've completely outsourced network support. They might have 2 or 3 IT people working on staff, but they also have their go-to people, for network design issues, for information security issues, maybe they're MSSP. And so, when it comes to working the viruses that don't require us to notify our customers, the entire incident response team doesn't want to be involved in that. The technical recovery team can work that and then report it to the incident response team in the normal monthly meeting or whatever. Or from a business continuity perspective, do we really need the loan officers to, listen in on all the details of how we're going to bring up a server? Because boy, we're going to lose them, and it's already hard enough to get them on the team anyway. And so we're kind of breaking out the technical recovery team as a subcommittee of the incident response committee or of the business continuity committee. So these are who the tasks that we have in the system could be delegated to. I could see in a smaller bank that you just kind of go through and, well, George is going to handle that. Joe is going to handle this, or Jane is going to handle, the information security stuff or whatever. I love walking in and seeing a informal approach to a formal process in community-based banks. The governance category, we already talked about that way too much. Watch the 2016 movie, and then also if you do decide to keep this column, don't forget to change the spelling of implementation. I noticed this last year too, I think. We're not really that big on running spell checkers before we are finished with our boilerplates, apparently. And by the way, when I say we, that's how I blame other people for. I'm sure it was me that did that. And then, give it a name. And if the name is a description, then put the description over here and then give it a name again. And I found that happens on a regular basis. You might have dual descriptions for the same name thing. And I'm kind of bumming out here because somehow we must have accidentally keyed a 0 in where that description was. So in one of our prior iterations, is whatever we're going to be missing from that particular 2-factor authentication basic control. Meanwhile, then, the source of the idea, I wanted to make sure you understood that just from a, where's these ideas Dan's delivering to us coming from. And so we have all the ideas we collected in the conference last year. We have all the ideas we collected in the conference this year. This is supposed to say InfoText 2017 basic controls, and your copy it does. But anyway, so beyond that, then there are a few in there where it's just something I've seen somewhere, and I made a note, hey, we need to get that into our technology planning, document. So we'll take a look at those. Obviously, we want to describe what we're doing. I feel like this is the part that will change over time, but that's why you want to make sure you memorialize this, because I also feel you should always have an original description. So if I was a bank and I was using this document to manage my technology plan throughout the year, I might actually go ahead and insert a column in here that I call the original description. And then I'd have this column be the moving target. This is what we're changing it to. This is how we've modified it. We've put more detail into what we mean by who, what, when, where, and why. This is the one that I really hope that everybody understands its importance throughout the year. Well, this is this is our branchless banking version 4 strategy statement. Or this is how we're refocusing on awareness at all levels, or, it looks to me like I got awareness training in there a couple times as a strategy objective. And so what we're really talking about there is that, if you have 6 strategy statements here, there would only be 6 items under here. If we can't determine a relevant strategy objective, then we're either going off our strategy or we need to revisit the strategy. And then we talked about, the metrics we're giving you here to try to determine relevance to the strategy, urgency, that sort of thing. You might be able to sort. I'm hoping everybody here, if you've used Dan's spreadsheets before, you should know how to sort, even though every time I sit down to Microsoft, they're updating and changing stuff. I mean, we want to, you could sort by, risk management. You could sort by urgency. You can filter down to just the urgent, the high urgency tactics. So what I'd like to do with the rest of my time then is I'm just going to, using that as an example, I'm going to pull down to some of the things that are new in here. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm just going to say, hey, let's go ahead and look at let's look at this one, because that one should have changed. And then let's look at the Infotext basic controls, and then what are those ideas that Dan had. But let's just kind of sort, now that we've whittled them down, let's go ahead and sort so that we can, first of all, look, at what we learned at the IBA Cybersecurity Conference real quick. I don't have the time to walk through all of these, but boy, look at it. The one thing I did gather from the Shazam talk is, boy, real-time payments processing is coming down the road. What I decided not to ask, because I felt like it would exude my naivety, but one of the things I like about how long it takes for an ACH transaction to clear is, from an incident response process, it gives us the ability to pull back corporate account takeovers. And I'm wondering, they're making a pretty big change here. Are they thinking it through from a risk management perspective? Endpoint replacement strategy. This would be an annual, regular duty if most of us had our way. It somehow came up in the IBA Cybersecurity Conference. It actually might already be part of a basic controls list, but suffice it to say, there was a talk at the conference about retiring, all the Windows, applications that are going to be retiring and that sort of thing. And so it's a big thing for us to do, again, is how we're going to go about upgrading our operating systems. And then also what I liked about that talk was it also addressed how to configure Office 365 for security purposes, especially if you're moving email out to the cloud, out to a cloud that's owned and managed by Microsoft, the people who have given us all jobs if we're in the information security realm. And that'll be the last time I complain about Microsoft today. Not probably. But anyway, Google Alerts and using Google Alerts for monitoring. Boy, I've always been doing that, but I have to say, I don't think we have Infotext in our Google Alert database. And so, what they're basically saying is, hey, let's set up, our bank executives on Google Alerts. Let's, set up our bank name on Google Alerts. You might want to check back to, privacy postures. If you're a smaller community-based bank, you probably don't have a policy. But, if we go back to, back when we were wanting to monitor social media, do our bank executives agree that we should be watching every time their name pops up on Google? I think it's a good practice from a safety perspective, but we also want to make sure we're not violating the privacy of our users, which really is going to cause me to kind of jump down and try to find one that I really liked here, so much so that we're going to figure out how to do it. And we're going to have a webinar on it, I think in March. Boy, the network segmentation talk was good. You really need to download this NIST publication 800-125B. But the guy that delivered the talk, Jason Michelinas, did a really good job of simplifying the subject of network segmentation to where I actually was understanding what he was saying almost through the whole talk. He really did a great job of helping us understand what needs to happen in order to even be in a position where we're ready to implement network segmentation. One of the talks, I can't remember who, really was talking about how an information security officer should establish security rituals at the bank. I know some banks where that would fly really well. I know some other banks that are already rolling their eyes at the whole notion. Pretext calling, we've been pushing pretext calling for our audit clients for a long time. Brian Krebs came out with this article right before the conference, which has kind of renewed everybody's interest in pretext calling. And almost every, not all every, but out of the 12 or 10 speakers or so, 8 of them probably talked about pretext calling as an attack vector that needs to be considered. But this is the one that I was looking for. The employee risk assessment. So if you think about it, we're managing a SIEM, right? we have our own SIEM, and we certainly don't have the ability to pull this data in yet. But from an escalation perspective, and you can tell Dan's really needing to run a spell checker on these before he says he's ready for the webinars. And this isn't the copy you're gonna get, so you'll have to spell that right. And as you can tell, you don't want to have Dan's favorite idea at a conference in here. But if you buy into this, it is something that you might want to consider. And we're going to be deciding what risk factors should we look at when it comes to prioritizing from a likelihood and an impact perspective, which employees are higher value target than other employees. And even from a patch management perspective, which is where I think this idea was born out of. I think the guy that was given the talk on patch management suggested that there's certain members of our team where, man, we need to keep their devices up to speed on patches, before Microsoft releases the patch if we can, because of how either dangerous they are from a likelihood perspective or how much of the keys to the kingdom they might have because of the account access that they might have. And so, it's typical risk management, likelihood and impact, but we're thinking we might need to break it down to some other risk factors. The webinar right now on if you go out to tour.infotex.com, you'll see that the webinar itself is kind of started off with the word shh, because I'm almost kind of worried that management's going to really push back if we're doing a risk assessments of individual employees. I haven't had a chance to think that through very much, but if the idea resonates with you, look to Infotex, because we're going to kind of dive into it and try to be ready by March to present. This is what we would do if we were going to do an employee risk assessment. It's almost like a threat assessment, by the way. But it's more from the other direction. What would a threat be looking for if they wanted to target our employees? We can use that to prioritize patch management. We can use that to prioritize escalation in our SIEM. Out of wallet questions now kind of gets into our basic controls from 2018. We do have a movie on Infotex, tour.infotex.com. There's two movies out there, an abridged version and a regular version. But this is just an example. Reviewing your insurance. It was a 2017 basic control. You'll probably see us repeating stuff from 2017 to 2018. We're very, very concerned about our clients putting Exchange out there and email. It can be secured, but there's a lot of work that you need to do to make sure it is secured. You should be inviting your officers your auditors to take a look at how you have Office 365 configured, so that you're not just throwing data out there that's very, very sensitive into the proverbial cloud that's managed by a company that none of us trust from an information security perspective. Let's make sure that we're doing everything we can to secure that. If you're an MSSP client of ours, know that we've got plenty of controls in place that can help along those lines. Just the ideas, I guess there's quite a few of them in here. And this is one, I guess I've seen these at various banks that I've been auditing or that I am working with. Help desk for customers, hire a virtual branch manager. These two kind of go hand in hand. I'll have to admit this, I've worked with a couple banks where even the ISO doesn't really know how to use their secure messaging system. One of the things I'm noticing is that we don't know what it looks like on the other end. It could be a very simple awareness training thing that you might be able to add into your, awareness training program. And so there you go, Mike. Sorry about that.
Thanks, Dan. Don't have any questions. Again, thank you for your time, Dan, and thank you for walking us through the technology planning worksheets. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And we hope that you found this informative. We'll have the movie up, and again, feel free to take that, or please take the short survey at the end here. And have a great day. Thanks again, Dan.
Thanks, everybody.
When you view an Infotex webinar or movie, you do so with 4 caveats. First, you're agreeing to the terms posted at the webpage listed on this slide. Second, our lawyers want you to know that what Infotex presents is often time-dated or about new trends, regulations, or guidance. and therefore we cannot provide this material with any warranty whatsoever. Thirdly, material provided with Infotext webinars and movies is copyrighted. You keep the copyright to material customized to your organization, but Infotext reserves the right to use the material in other engagements and boilerplates. See our transfer of copyright agreement at the web page listed in this slide. Finally, those who view our webinars or movies may be added to an email mailing list. If you do not wish to receive notice of additional educational opportunities, please accept our apologies and please opt out at the web page shown on this slide.